Welcome to Sum It Up, an LSR7 podcast. Today, we are excited to talk to a very special guest.
I do encourage my students to experiment and take risks, and I am trying to model that here. Of course, this idea may not work. After I glaze it, I may decide the laser engraving isn't the way to go, and I might need to do decals or something else. But I'm trying those different things and experimenting and taking risks and trying new things in my personal artwork, and I love having those conversations with my students.
My name is Katie Bergen, and I serve as the Executive Director of Public Relations for the Lee Summit R7 School District. I'm here with Superintendent David Buck. Our guest today is an art teacher at Lee Summit West High School, and she is among 19 professional artists in the Kansas City region whose art will be permanently installed at the new Kansas City International Airport Terminal set to open in 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, Rachel Hubbard Klein. Mrs. Klein, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Dr. Buck, how are you doing?
Fantastic. Glad to be here.
So, Mrs. Klein, first we just wanted to ask you, how long have you worked in LSR7?
This is my third year at Lee Summit West. I taught for 11 years at Park Hill High School.
And so we're here today to really talk about a personal art project and accomplishment for you, but we wanted to talk about how do you balance teaching art with sort of your professional, personal development as an artist?
That is a great question that I get often, and I feel like it can be challenging for teachers because we spend so much of our energy giving to students all day. Emotional energy, mental energy, physical energy with as masters of our content area. And it can be hard to balance anything kind of outside of that time. I grew up always being a very busy person. I was a varsity athlete. I was in band. I played piano, and I was an artist and had straight A's. So I feel like I've just always had a lot of projects and a lot of things to do. And I actually feel like I thrive with the more things I have on my plate, the better I can handle things. I kind of flounder if I don't have enough to do. My first year of teaching, I was also coaching basketball and soccer and in grad school. So I've always kind of had a lot going on and kept that balance between teaching and other things in my personal life.
So the public art project you're part of, from my understanding, was commissioned by the 1% for Art Project, which I believe ensures the installation of art when new buildings are constructed or renovated in Kansas City. So what drew you to this airport public arts project in particular?
I saw the call for entry for the KCI new terminal, and I had a couple of ideas. I wasn't sure if I was actually going to submit for the proposal. There are 3 phases in terms of the artwork for the KCI terminal. The first 2 phases were pretty large installations, and those were international calls put out to anyone in the world could submit to those. So I didn't feel quite confident enough that I could handle something at that scale. However, the third phase was reserved just for regional artists or those who had really close connections to Kansas City. My grandfather and uncle were pilots for TWA, and I have a couple of aunts who are also flight attendants. I also grew up in the Northland, so the airport has been kind of a staple in our family, and I thought it would be really fun to bring in those family connections with my artwork. This is just also a really fantastic opportunity for me as an artist to work on this scale. I've never done a large public installation before, and this will be the largest piece that I've ever had commissioned.
Ms. Klein, tell me a little bit about your inspiration to apply because your connections with the airport, but of your project. So what did you submit, and how is that inspired by your family history and regional history?
That's a great question. I finished my Master of Fine Arts in 2019 from the Maryland Institute College of Art. My thesis work for my MFA largely inspired my proposal for KCI. I started developing a lot of ceramic tile fragments that are based on American historical quilt patterns, but a lot of those patterns also show up in universal tile patterns around the world from a long kind of history of architecture in different cultures. So my idea was to blend those kind of quilt patterns that we see universally. I thought that would be a good connection to thinking about how in travel, especially in Kansas City, we're the geographic kind of center of the country, but we're traveling to other places, whether they be in the States or abroad. I also liked thinking about the fragment and how my family passed down a lot of quilts to me, that some of them are complete, some are incomplete. I actually think the fragments are more interesting than the finished quilts. And a lot of those quilts, I remember my grandmother sitting down with me and telling me stories about my family members based on the fabrics that are in the quilts. So I like that kind of historical connection. The Kansas City Star used to publish a quilt pattern from the 1920s through the 1960s every single week. So I am using that history to get my motifs for these different patterns.
So tell me a little bit about public art in a public venue and why that's important.
Part of my proposal included that since I'm a public school teacher, I like the idea of the public aspect of this project. The Kansas City 1% campaign does require that the artwork will be in a public building that's in the city of Kansas City. This is the largest 1% campaign for artwork that the city has ever done because of the scale of the airport. It's a very large project. I like the idea that anyone can see my work. It's not like you have to go to a gallery or find my website online, that people who may not otherwise engage with my artwork will have the opportunity to see it when they are at the gate, either leaving or coming into Kansas City.
So soon we'll be able to go and see this project. So where will we see it in the airport?
The 19 regional artist artworks will be in concourses A and B. Most of us are in, I think it's concourse A. I think there are 15 of us in one concourse and 4 of us in the other concourse. But you will have to have a ticket, just like you would at the airport now, to go inside. And soon, as we know, the security will be a different situation with the one terminal. So you will have to have a ticket to go somewhere to see my work, but otherwise it will be a public piece.
So have you begun the work on this art project, or do you have to do it on site?
It is not on site since the airport is still being built. I need to deliver my work in 1 year. I'm very thankful that I have a year to work on this. I have a lot of tests that I plan to do. I am using my ideas from my thesis show, which are different ceramic fragments. However, all the work will be new pieces. I just started a test yesterday. Wes Whisker at Lee Summit West is helping me with some laser engraving. So I was trained on the laser engraver yesterday, and I started pressing those textures into my clay. So the laser aspect portion involves looking at headlines from the Kansas City Star, and these will be headlines that are significant to Kansas City, but also my personal kind of memories. The one I did yesterday was about Metro North Mall closing, which was one of like a staple of my childhood that doesn't really exist anymore. So I laser engraved that newspaper story on a piece of plywood to press into my clay slabs. And some of the textures are going to be visible. However, after these are glazed, some of them will be kind of hidden. But that also goes along with my idea of the fragment and how our memories are kind of fragmented with what we remember and what we might forget and what shows up and what disappears.
That's incredible. As educators, we always want to model being lifelong learners. And obviously, you're trying something new here as well as creating art. So tell me about the importance as a teacher to model your craft.
I love that you asked that question because I do encourage my students to experiment and take risks. And I am trying to model that here. Of course, this idea may not work. After I glaze it, I may decide the laser engraving isn't the way to go, and I might need to do decals or something else. But I'm trying those different things and experimenting and taking risks and trying new things in my personal artwork. And I love having those conversations with my students. I'm very fortunate enough to teach our IB Visual Arts and Portfolio classes, so I do have those advanced art students.
It's clear you're very passionate about art and teaching. So can you tell us a little bit more about why you're so passionate about art and teaching?
I actually never wanted to be a teacher. I'm sorry. I'm admitting that. My grandmother was a teacher and my mom was a teacher. So I think I didn't want to have maybe those, that kind of connection maybe with students, or I wanted to do something different. I initially went to school to study fashion design, and then I kind of fell into teaching, but I've been doing it for 14 years and I wouldn't change a thing. I love it. And I'm passionate about art because I think it's a way to not only express ourselves creatively, but it does have a kind of intellectual model behind it too. So it kind of blends together technique and creativity and also ideas that we can communicate to those around us.
Ms. Klein, I can tell you that we're very fortunate you found teaching and you found us.
I am so excited to be at Lee Summit West. I have a great art department and we have amazing art students, which you probably know.
I'm curious, you obviously you teach students and help them with their craft, but there's so much intention and thought behind, the rationale or the why behind your artwork. How do you teach students about developing that intention or that why in addition to the technical skills you teach them about creating art?
It can be really hard because some students are more technical minded. Some are very creative minded. They might have all of the ideas, but not have the skill to convey those ideas. We want to marry those two things together. In our department, we usually scaffold things with the beginning level classes have more technical skills that we're building. And then we start kind of taking off the training wheels and giving them prompts or questions that they start developing visual answers to. And then when they are kind of free in portfolio, they have all those skills from previous classes that they understand, our expectations of looking at other artists and developing their techniques at another level, as well as conveying certain ideas.
Have you shared with your students this exciting news?
I have. I found out on September 3rd through a Zoom city council meeting. I previously got an email the day before school started that was a little like, you made it through the first round. I wasn't sure what that meant in terms of, am I officially in? Is it just round one and there's a round two? So on September 3rd, which was a Friday, I logged into the Zoom during painting one and we all kind of watched it together in the background. And I thought I saw my slide and it was official, like, oh my gosh, I made it in. This is really happening. And then that Monday, I shared it with all of my students.
Ms. Klein, it's a great honor to do something in public, but I'm sure you do things just for joy too. What brings you joy? Your personal art?
That's a good question. I feel like I am my best self when I am creating. It's a great way for me to decompress and to process through a lot of thoughts I have. I'm very much a thinker in my head. I'm not a verbal thinker, so I can think through my hands as I'm making things. I enjoy weaving, I enjoy painting, I enjoy ceramics. I really love all of the art media, and it's opportunities like this project at KCI where I can put together a lot of my love for history with my making that I really kind of thrive.
Mrs. Klein, we're excited for you. We're excited to be able to see your artwork in KCI in just a couple of years. Thanks so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
What a joy. Thank you.
You've been listening to LSR7 Sum It Up. Find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube.